Thank you so much. And you said you're lucky to have me. I'm lucky to be here because this is what I love doing. I absolutely love scaling up. I love working with fast growth companies. I love working with, I call you guys a medium-sized company. And I'll talk a little bit about myself in a minute, but I'm not right now, I'm not the CEO, but I was a CEO of a fast growth, mid-sized company for quite a few years. And so this is what I'm passionate about. So who is Wade Wyant? A couple things about myself. I'm first and foremost an entrepreneur. I love this space of starting businesses. That doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur to relate to me. I get it. The entrepreneur side of JetLinks is probably over. You are now growing a scaling up company, but that's first and foremost what I am. Secondly, I'm passionate about helping people. And so that's why after I sold my business, I said, I want to go out and help individuals grow their businesses. I like to say I'm a recovering CEO. I'm trying to make up for all the bad things I did in my last business. And then finally, my focus is on helping companies like yours grow. What's Red Wagon? You're going to see this pop up, not much, but on the screen and whatnot. That's just my business. Why Red Wagon? It was pretty simple. I sold my last business 2 years ago, and I had joked for years that I was going to take my kids' Red Wagon and sell hot dogs out of it. So I thought about that Red Wagon and some of the time I missed with my kids growing up and the fact that thing had been there the whole time for them. I mean, I got this Red Wagon when my son was born in 1998, and I got the next Christmas would be 99. I still have that same Red Wagon, and it had survived all those years of being abused, left outside in the snow and the rain. And I'm like, that's what I'd like to be, something very, very traditional, but also something you can depend on. So that's where the name came from. What is Gazelles? Gazelles is the parent company to Scaling Up. It's actually probably one of the worst names that has ever been picked for a company, to be quite candid with you. Vern will even say that now. He regrets a little bit picking that name. But that's the parent company for Scaling Up. The rebranding efforts ongoing right now to go from Gazelles to Scaling Up. You also heard Rockefeller Habits, right? Well, that was the name of Vern's original book, which I'll get to in a second. But that's the branding and why we're here and what we're going to hear about. A couple warnings about the presentation. First of all, I did come very casual. I don't own a pair of dress shoes anymore. I promised myself I wouldn't wear them after I sold my last business. So if it offends you that I'm wearing some white Nikes, I apologize. Tomorrow I'll be wearing black Nikes, so that might fix it. But I can speak at about 200 words per minute, and I can gust at about 300. So be ready to listen quickly because I go quickly. But the good news is you don't have to listen to me the whole day. We're going to stop and do some exercises, and it's not going to just be me presenting slides. I will warn you, and I'm not joking about this, it's okay to laugh, but we do have 450 slides. That's over the course of 2 days. The thing, though, is the slides are just there to keep us on track. At no time am I going to be reading from the slides or like, okay, let me just look here and read that. These are going to be images. They're going to be things to spur thought and conversation. As you can tell, I'm very passionate. And every once in a while I can be a know-it-all, but I do know that I don't know it all. And even though I can be that, I get that I don't have all the answers. In fact, a lot of times, if I'm doing my job, I'm just asking the right questions. These tools are here to ask questions. I love a saying that Scott actually gave this to me, and I've been using it now with some of my other clients that I work with, and that is that Vern's not the boss of me. Wade's not the boss of me either. That's your saying. Okay, so Vern's not the boss of me. He's the author of the book. Wade's not the boss of me. We're just here to give you questions and tools. And hopefully they work for you. They will. The one-page plan is something you're going to develop, and it gets you on the same page. So these are things to ask really great questions and to get you guys to be thinking about what are the right answers, because you have them. I don't have those answers. So be ready for that. And as far as those answers go, this is Captain Obvious from, I think, the Priceline commercials. I ripped it off, so don't tell anybody. There'll be a few images like that. I'm fair use, right? I can use them for just a split second. But every once in a while, I'll say something, you're like, come on, Wade, we already know that. But just like how transformational Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that book was almost 30 years ago now, these tools are very similar. These are things you already intuitively know or you're already doing, and we're just reminding you of them or bringing you back to them. And so we just want to bring you back to some of those and introduce you to some new ones. So the goal here isn't we want to teach you some new things, of course, but there will be some times when it's just like, okay, Captain Obvious, we already know that. So let's talk about impact for a minute. So the first hour or so of the slides, we're not going to be going through the book or the chapters. I really want to spur your thinking. I want to get you ready. I want to open up that part of your mind that's a creative part of your mind. And so we're going to go through some different just thought exercises. It's going to seem like I'm jumping around, but eventually it'll tie together where you'll go, okay, this makes sense. It's getting into the 4 disciplines, the things that Vern wrote the book about. But let's get back to impact, because this is a Wade Wyant thing. If you're anything like me, you probably had a friend, or maybe in your own home you had a Newton's cradle, and if you were a kid or a mischievous kid like I was, you probably pulled that ball back, then you pulled 2 back, then 3, and you want to see how far you can make it swing, and then if you're anything like me, you try to hit as hard as you could, and it got wound up, and you didn't want your mom to catch you, and so on and so forth. As adults and as people in business, I want to bring you back to that thing you did as a kid, playing that Newton's cradle, and talk about the idea of impact. In your business, whether it be your base, or whether it be at the NOC, or whether it be in interaction with a client, wherever it is, the amount of effort you put into that thing directly translates to the impact on the other side. You're here today, you made a big effort to be here, and I appreciate that. I love being part of large teams that are coming together. It's so fun to see the energy. And so you've already made a big investment. Don't lose that investment by not making the additional investment by being here and present right now. It's not about me. It's not about the material. It's about what are you going to learn and take away for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So make that investment. Pull that ball or 2 balls back as far as you can today or the next 2 days to really get the most out of this material. And then also remember, impact is also important when it comes to taking some risk. Now, you guys may have your own risk matrix for what you do at your bases, so I'm not trying to tell you to go hog wild on risk, but I do want to just encourage you to think about that. How much risk are you taking in your own business? There may be the idea of impact as far as investment goes, but if you want the impact on the other end of the spectrum as far as you want the results, there's got to be some risk as well. And so we're going to show you new tools. New tools is a changing to your thinking. That in itself is risk. And I want you to jump into this risk with me and open up your mind a little bit and say, you know what, there's some value to looking at these new tools, and there's a value to possibly adapting some of them. Of course, some of them will just be forced on you, but your investment will be what really makes a difference. So in that book, you have in your book in front of you, and you can open it up and flip through it if you want, you have the system that we're going to be using. And there's been a significant investment into the next 2 days. So if that is any indication of what system you're going to be using, it's in front of you. And then I'm going to take the next 2 days to walk you through not only this book, but the concepts in it and how to use them. And we're going to work on some of the concepts. We're going to fill some of them out. And we're going to, hopefully by the end of the 2 days, get you a really good foundation in the system. And in the end, this is the same page we want to get everybody on. Doesn't mean there's not going to be arguments. So one thing I forgot to tell you in my intro is I use scaling up in my business. I scaled from 0, just me and another person, to $10 million. We plateaued, and those were the easiest years when we used scaling up, just right in line with Jamie's example. Then we did it again. Later, we reused or readopt, or we returned to, is probably a better term, scaling up, and we grew again very, very quickly, shot up to $40 million in about 2 years and of revenue. And we had everybody on the same page, which made it so much easier to have a discussion, especially as we got past 100 employees. I know you guys are far past 100. You have almost 100 people in here. But as your bases grow, this will be really important as well. And so this is the ultimate goal, is that we get this filled out. To Scott's point, it's not necessarily going to get all done in the next 2 days. And this is a process, this is a journey, but we're starting it together today, and you're being brought into the journey. And so think about this pamphlet as a playground. I'm sure, looking at the age of people in the room, most of you have kids, and most of you either have kids that are young or at one time did. If you look at this playground, imagine it without the fence, and imagine it with a very busy street surrounding it. I know that takes a little bit of imagination, but just do it with me for a second. And if you had this playground and you had young kids and it was on a busy street with no fence, that beautiful fence that it has is gone, where would you want your kids to play at on that playground? Dead center, right? It's okay to be interactive, guys. You can say, well, I'd like to have them play right on that little car or right here in the center someplace, because there's a busy street and there's no fence. But as soon as you put up a fence, the kids can play anywhere they want. They can be very creative, and they can go anywhere they want in the playground. That's the same idea with tools and systems like this. It's not to keep people in. It's not like the fence. The fence isn't there to keep you in. It's to keep you safe, and that's the same thing here. And so we'll return to this concept several times in the next couple of days, but that's really what we're trying to accomplish. So if you haven't done the pre-reading, if you don't know what scaling up is, this is the portion where I tell you about scaling up. Scaling up was written by this guy, Verne Harnish. The guy's 60 and still has a full head of hair. He kills me. I'm like, oh, I'd love to have that. I don't know if I keep it quite that long, but this is the gentleman who wrote Scaling Up. And it's a second version of his first book, The Rockefeller Habits. But before I talk about that, Verne has been in the entrepreneur space and in the scale-up space for about 30 years. And he started EO. If you're not familiar with EO is Entrepreneurs Organization. It's a global organization. It's very similar to YPO, but it's specifically for entrepreneurs of people who are starting and building businesses. He started this back in the 80s, and then from there went into consulting and writing books and doing what he does today, which is speaking. And so he started the Scaling Up business. But what I really want to get to is this. He wrote his first book in the early 2000s, late 90s, called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And Mastering Rockefeller Habits was the beginning of the system, because what he'd done is he'd studied Rockefeller and all the habits he literally had, what Rockefeller had done. And by all accounts, Rockefeller was the richest man who's ever lived, all through history. Standard Oil was broken up by the government, but at the time, you could argue some other people were richer, but by most accounts, he's the richest man that's ever lived. And he grew that business incredibly fast. And so Verne went to look at what he did, and he wrote down these different habits, built this book called Mastering Rockefeller Habits. Well, it became a big success, and a lot of businesses adopted it as like their framework for running the business. He also wrote this book, The Greatest Business Decision Ever. And then in around 2012, he decided to do Rockefeller Habits 2.0 and call it Scaling Up, which is a term that most people have been using lately for what your business and our business are doing, which is scaling up. So we'll refer to Verne Harnish a lot because he wrote the book, literally, and it's his material that we're talking about. But what we really want to focus on is that there are many businesses that start up, but very few scale up. You have scaled up. You've done a great job. The idea that you've gotten this far is amazing. But what we want to do is we want to take you further with this system. And so before I go to the next slide, a lot of times people look at their industry or what they're doing, they're like, we're stuck, or there's challenges with our industry. And we like to joke about how the automobile put the horse industry out of business. You've always heard the term, you don't want to be making buggy whips at the turn of the century, right? Because you're going to be out of business. But it's not exactly true. I mean, if you look at the industry, this industry, this is the value, not necessarily the revenue, but the value of the industry. It's a $300 billion industry worldwide. And what's happened is the horse industry has shifted from transportation to entertainment. And there are people, and if you're in this industry at all, if you deal with horses, it is a huge industry. And people do very well financially in it. Now, there's a lot of people who spend money in it, but there's a lot of people who make money in it. And in the UK, it's the second largest sporting industry they have. So the industry isn't necessarily a bad industry. It's just a matter of where is it going. I think you guys are in a hot industry, and that's up to you to decide whether I'm right or wrong on that. But the point I'm trying to make is there really are no bad businesses. There's either bad strategy or bad leadership. There's no bad businesses. Every business has the ability to do something. It's kind of like they say, there's always a bull market somewhere. There's always a way to make money in a business. And so again, this brings me back to this point. Many start up. It's easy to start a business, but it's hard to scale up and it's hard to maintain your business. But I really want to show you a video that we built specifically for the Scaling Up clients and for these Scaling Up seminars or summits that highlights Apple and highlights Steve Jobs. And now, it's a little bit of a cliche, right, because everybody talks about Apple, and we'll use other examples that are outside of Apple. But I think there's some real inspiration we can get from what Apple has done and how, if you look at, they've only been in business for 30 plus years, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But if we look at what they've done and some of the principles that they've applied, that could easily be applied to what you guys are doing.
Building a company is really hard, and it requires your greatest persuasive abilities to hire the best people you can and keep them at your company and keep them working, doing the best work of their lives, hopefully.
I think one of the things that really separates us from the high primates is that we're tool builders. And I read a study that measured the efficiency of locomotion for various species on the planet. The condor used the least energy to move a kilometer. And humans came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It was not too proud of a showing for the crown of creation. So that didn't look so good, but then somebody at Scientific American had the insight to test the efficiency of locomotion for a man on a bicycle. And a man on a bicycle, or a human on a bicycle, blew the condor away, completely off the top of the charts. And that's what a computer is to me. What a computer is to me is it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with. And it's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds.
I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30. And then I got fired. And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. And the reason is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, if you're not having fun doing it, you don't really love it, you're going to give up. And that's what happens to most people, actually. If you really look at the ones that ended up being successful, unquote, in the eyes of society and the ones that didn't, oftentimes it's the ones that are successful loved what they did so they could persevere when it got really tough. And the ones that didn't love it quit because they're sane, right? Who would want to put up with this stuff if you don't love it? So it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of worrying constantly.
So love him or hate him, Steve Jobs is 100% right about that passion and that purpose. And it's one of the things that we want to bring in. It's the first fundamental things that we talk about. And this is becoming even more important as we see a generational shift. I know you guys are probably tired of hearing about the millennials, right? But the reality is that as we see this shift, the idea of having a purpose in your business is so important because people won't stick with it if you don't. So we'll get back to this concept in a few minutes, but I really want to talk about or highlight this passion, purpose, and then finally persistence. And the persistence is going to be probably something we're not going to return to, so I'm going to highlight it just for a second here and say, you've got to stick with it, right? You've got to stay with those things. You've got to be persistent about what you're doing. We're going to talk about purpose and passion here over the next 2 days, but man, persistence is so important. And we're going to see some of Apple's persistence just in a few minutes in a chart I'm going to show you. Now, let's talk about your passions. Anybody ever take the StrengthsFinders test? Have you guys done that here internally? Okay, a couple people. StrengthsFinders is amazing. Marcus Buckingham came up with this. But the idea of StrengthsFinders, and I recommend it for everybody, it's an amazing test that highlights not what you're good at, what you're bad at. It just simply says, here are your 5 strengths. And it can identify exactly what your strengths are. And so once you have those 5 strengths, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's who I am. And what Marcus Buckingham will tell you is that when you're looking at strengths, and this is back to that passion, right? You have to really focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. And his argument is that, look, and he just wrote a new book called The 9 Lies About Work. If you want just a really inspiring book, all research-based, none of it his opinion, all research-based, an amazing book about, seriously, those 9 lies they tell us. You read this on the plane home or on the drive home, you're going to you're going to be inspired about some of the things we've been told our entire life. They're just absolute lies. But anyhow, in there though, and in that book as well, he really highlights the fact that you have to focus on your strengths. Of course, don't let your weaknesses get in your way, right? I always like to say, take your foot off the gas pedal on your weaknesses. I used to be a really destructive person, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. In my own business, and please don't judge me, I stopped doing this, but if you mess something up, I would let you know. And I was not nice about it. I'd be in your face like, oh man, you screwed that up. What's wrong with you? You should know better, the whole bit. I was a really bad person. And I found Strength Finders. I found also another book we'll talk about in a few minutes. And I just realized I didn't have to become a better person in that area. I just had to stop pushing down on the gas pedal, right? Just take my foot off the gas. Every time I thought destructive things, I just don't say them. That's all that it took. And then go focus on my strengths, which is I'm very inspirational. That's why people still worked for me even after I was mean to them, because I was very inspirational and I had a lot of energy, and I was able to start things, never finish them, but I was able to start them. Another laugh, thank you. But that's what I did, is I focused on my strengths. And this is what Marcus talks about. So in your own business, we really want you to do that. We want you to focus on your strengths. So we're talking about playing checkers versus chess. If you're out there focusing on your strengths, then you're playing chess at this point. So what I want you to do is take out a piece of paper, and I want you to draw a line we're going to do a quick exercise. Draw a line down the center, and on one side, write love, and on the other side, write low. This is just for you. Just for you. It's in your own practice. It's for you to think about at your base. And I want you to write down a couple of things you love doing at work. I love making proposals. I love calling customers. Some people love solving problems. How crazy is that, right? A few people do. Some people love dealing with those irate customers. I love figuring out a new strategy. I love process. Whatever it is you love. On the other side, think of a few things you loathe. What do you hate doing in your job? I'm not saying you don't get to do those anymore. You might still have to do them. I can't promise you that. But what do you loathe doing? And what we want you to do is we want you to focus on the love side. And then on the loathe side, what can you do to either get someone else to do that, to delegate, to find a way to just get it done, to lick that toad, if you will, and just get it over with? What can you do to tackle that? All right, so what I'd recommend is with that list, that's just for you, but this is one of the ideas that we're going to give you, Strength Finders. And we're going to say, look, take this back and work on this. Today's not just about scaling up. It's about just really baptizing you, almost drowning you, if you will, in the ideas and concepts that are throughout scaling up. And this is one of them. I want to get it out there. Another little fun game you might want to play, and I have some of my clients have been doing this with me and teasing me about it, but it's how many books will Wade mention? And I think the top is 55. That's the top number in 2 days. So if you want to start writing down the books, because by the end of this, you're going to hate me. You're like, oh my goodness, this guy's recommended so many books. Part of it is, though, we're going to take the nuggets out of the books and share them with you right there. Like Strength Finders is great, but if you just did the love-loathe exercise and you took that and were serious about what you just did, you just read the whole book. I'm not discouraging you from reading it, but that's one of the biggest concepts in it. So part of this also, where we mention the books, is to give the authors credit, but also so that we can highlight what's the most important thing to take out of that. All right, so adjusting back to Steve Jobs. So just like the bicycle or the computer is the bicycle for the mind, your purpose, your company's purpose is the bicycle for your company. If you think about, when you saw locomotion, the amount of energy I'm expending just by walking across the stage, the amount of energy it takes, is 3 times as much as if I had a bike. Now, of course, as a bike, I'd be to the wall in no time, but the concept still applies. Purpose, having your purpose right, the purpose you're all going after, this can make the biggest difference in your business. So I'll give you an example of my business. It was a stupid purpose, and I'm not suggesting you even adopt or that it was a good one, but it was good in the fact that it worked. In my first business, our purpose was to be the best Altiris vendor in the world. You probably never heard of Altiris, and it doesn't matter. It's an obscure piece of software, but we wanted to be the best at it. And that gave us absolute purpose. When we went to trade shows, when we did implementations, whatever we did around that software, man, we had purpose. It wasn't a very good purpose, but we had purpose. And guess what? After about 3 or 4 years of really hard work, we got the award as the best Altiris vendor in the world. And if you're like, oh, impressive. Well, not really. There was only 20 in the whole world, and it didn't really amount to much. But we absolutely got there because that's what we said we were going to do. I'm not exaggerating. We would go into team meetings, and I'd say, we are going to be the best Altiris vendor in the world. And they're like, oh, my engineers like, yeah, let's go do that, because they were very passionate about the product. It was a security product. And then we'd go out and do it. And so purpose, if you said it wrong, people are going to go after the wrong thing. If you said it right, it's amazing what can be accomplished if you said it right. So you've probably seen Start With Why. Simon Sinek wrote the book on this. He took the simplest concept in the whole world, and man, he's really turned it into a whole industry, and good for him. But he's so right with Start With Why, and it's just basically very simple. What is your why? What is your purpose? You should have a personal why, a personal purpose. Why do you show up and do what you do? Why is that important to you? And then, of course, there's this other book here, Bringing Out the Best in People, which is a great book as well. But starting with why do you do this? So if you think about in your own business, again, remember, these are thought exercises. I'm not necessarily saying you guys are doing any work right now. I'm setting the table for work later today and tomorrow. If you think about some of the purposes, the biggest purposes out there, 3M's actually in the middle of changing theirs, but theirs was innovation. And then you look at Nike, which is winning. I'm a big fan. Disney is happiness. If anybody's ever taken your children there, I guarantee you were not happy, but they were. And that made you happy, right? Walmart, you all know this one, Robinhood. They're starting to change this, though. They're working on that. We'll see where they get with that. Microsoft used to be a desktop on every a computer on every desk and in every home, and they accomplished that. Shoot, they got computers in our pockets now. I got two up here on the display on the podium. I mean, we've got computers everywhere. So they changed theirs to Ubiquity, which they're getting very close to doing. And then finally, the purpose of Starbucks initially was they wanted to be that second place you'd go. Right? They wanted to be that place you'd go for meetings. I mean, how often you said, let's go have a meeting at Starbucks? You may not even meet at Starbucks, but that's what you say. Their new purpose is they want to be the third place. They want to be the third place as you leave home, right? Apple, the first 25 years, got to 9,600 employees. In fact, in 2001, they were almost bankrupt. Most people don't know this, but in 2001, Microsoft gave Apple a small loan of $100 million to keep them afloat because they were almost about to go bankrupt. I say almost, they were going to go bankrupt. And so Microsoft bought, get a little of this, a 10% interest. It wasn't actually a loan. They bought 10% interest without any voting shares in Apple to keep them afloat. Because Steve went to Bill Gates. He said, look, we're going to make it. We just need a little bit of cash to float this business. And Steve said to Bill Gates, he said, it's incumbent on you to do this because if you don't, you'll be the only only operating system out there, and then you're going to go right into antitrust. So they gave him the money. Best investment Microsoft's ever made, because look at the company now. Now, of course, over time they paid that back. So I don't think Microsoft owns 10% any longer. In fact, they may own 0. But the bottom line is, they got to 9,600 employees in the first 25 years, and then now there are 116,000 employees. Sometimes it takes 25 years to get to your ultimate purpose. You look at what Steve Jobs did when he came back to Apple. He came in and he said, we're going to do 7 things and we're going to do them really well. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Look at Starbucks, this overnight success story, right? Not so much. They opened with just one store back in the early 70s, and then by 1996 they had 16,000 employees. But in the last, 22 years, they've grown to 254,000 employees. Just massive growth. So remember, this is not just about the startups and the people who are early on. This is also about companies that have been around for a while. And some of these organizations find their purpose 20 years in. And this is not just about organizations. If you look at Peter Drucker, who is the godfather of what I'm doing right now, he was the guy who started all this. He's the guy who wrote some of the first management books out there and made it popular. In fact, Peter Drucker said at some points in his career that the idea of better management, this idea of management, what was responsible for a 50-fold increase in production when manufacturing what was the primary thing we did here in the U.S. Whether he's right or wrong on that, I don't know, but he definitely wrote the book on management. Well, he wrote a third of his books before the age of 50, and he wrote the other 2/3 after the age of 50. And so this is not just for businesses, this is for people as well. And there's this idea that, well, you get to a certain point and you're done. I mean, Picasso was the same way. Most of his art was done after he was 50. So there is a lot of examples of people going for a while prior to having that success.